Hello everyone, and welcome to Countermeasures. Here's what's coming up. A recent wave of xenophobic attacks in South Africa, with rioters causing chaos, touching vehicles and looting shops, many of which are owned by foreign nationals, has left Nigerians and other foreign nationals living in fear of their lives, as well as soured the government's relationship with its regional counterparts. Several South African chain stores have shuttered their operations as protests against xenophobic attacks grow in the rest of Africa, and official continental criticism of South Africa continue to mount. The backlash across Africa to xenophobic violence against Africans is spreading and becoming more violent. In retaliatory strikes, South African-owned chain stores and trucks have been targeted in other African countries, including Nigeria, Zambia, and Mozambique. What does the government need to do to stop this cycle of violence getting completely out of control? SaharaTV Countermeasures spoke with Olabisi Deji-Folutile. He's a former editor at Punch, a columnist with several national news publications, and also a member of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. Buhari's government has intensified its crackdown on political dissidents opposing its policies, and it's using the same intimidating and probably unconstitutional tactics against demonstrators and dissenting voices. Evans Ufeli, a legal practitioner, shares an insight on the legality of such intolerance to opposition and dissent. We examine this issue as Countermeasures starts right now. Let's get straight to the heart of these discussions. Why are Nigerians a major target as far as the xenophobic violence in South Africa is concerned, from your perspective?
Well, I won't even say Nigerians are major targets. I would say Africans in general are major targets, because from the past you could see that not only Nigerians have been attacked, we could see that people from Mozambique have been attacked, Malawi, from Congo, from Namibia. So it's not as if it's just a target at Nigerians alone. I think xenophobia in South Africa is a major problem that has been there right from their independence. And I think it's something that has to do with there are factors about this problem. I think they have factors affecting their relationship with people, probably because of their history of apartheid, and that mentality in them. I don't know, maybe there is something at fault with that mentality, and somehow they've not been able to get out of the fact that, the whites are gone. So they probably see every other person coming in as another threat. The whites came, dominated them, and they are gone. Unfortunately for them, the blacks are coming in their groups, and they think they are also trying to get what they should be getting. So I won't say it's about Nigerians. I would say it's about Africans or foreigners. Let me put it that way, foreigners living in South Africa.
Now, let's get your perspective on this. Part of the narratives that have been given to South Africans on why this discrimination against foreigners, so to say, has to do with the fact that the foreigners are taking their jobs. What's your view about this narrative?
Well,
are foreigners actually taking their South Africans' job?
I think this is what I understand about it. With the influx of foreigners in South Africa, menial jobs that South Africans are meant to be doing, maybe probably for higher fees, the foreigners who are mostly poor going there are taking over such jobs. So the people we are talking about are not the high-ranking officials in the land, or maybe experts, but we are talking about the low people, the people at the lower level. And Probably you want to be a cleaner. Somebody comes from Congo, a job that could have been done for probably maybe 10 rounds or whatever. Somebody comes to offer it for probably 5, lower, and they feel such. Those are the kind of people that are feeling threatened. When you talk about jobs, foreigners coming to take over our jobs, they are not the high intellectual sort of jobs. They are all these
low-level jobs. Yes. Now, let's look at Nigerians, especially the Nigerian communities in South Africa. They have actually had a very brutal brunt of this xenophobic violence. Most of their businesses have been looted, bombed. We've even had cases where Nigerians have been killed, so to say. Now, what are some of the problems that Nigerians themselves are having in South Africa, or with the South African people?
Well, I think, Nigerians are resilient. And wherever they find themselves, they will do well. So I think part of the problem is the fact that Nigerians are doing very well. And from what I told you earlier on, this mentality with these people, and which they have also expressed in any case, they've said it that, and even a minister of theirs, I think the minister in charge of trade recently said, what do you want to expect when foreigners come here and they do better than our people and they are not sharing their trade secrets? So for Nigerians, I can imagine how prosperous they will be in South Africa. And I can imagine how these locals will look at them and see them as if, oh, you are doing far, far better than us. And because of this, you don't deserve to be in this place. You are sharing a space with us. What are you doing here? So I think that is the major problem of Nigerians, because they tend to do well everywhere they go to.
Now, let's look at the Nigerian government's reaction to this recent crisis, especially within the Nigerian government and the South African government. Do you think the Nigerian government have done enough beyond just condemning the attack, calling the South African ambassador, and all these measures, sending a special envoy to South Africa? Is that enough?
I think that is not even a solution at all. I think that is just a kind of fire brigade approach to a serious problem. Let's face it, if Nigeria is good, do you think Nigerians will be traveling to South Africa just because most of the people going there are going there to look for greener pastures? So I think in as much as it is good for Nigeria to condemn xenophobic attacks, it's not, but it has to go beyond mere condemnation. It has to go beyond mere recalling of an ambassador, because that is not going to solve the problem. What Nigerian government needs to do is to, first of all, make its citizens to be secure, both nationally and internationally. Just imagine, could South Africa, in any form of madness, deal with an American citizen? You can't even imagine it. So, in as much as it is good for Nigeria to condemn, but it goes far, far beyond mere condemnation. And you operate from the position of power, mind you. If Nigeria is actually the big brother that it claims to be in Africa, then it should be respected. And what you earn respect. You earn respect. You don't just assume that you'll be respected. What will make Nigeria to be respected? If Nigeria is taking care of its citizens, if Nigeria is providing the necessary infrastructure at home, if Nigeria is providing job opportunities at home, if Nigeria is providing leadership in terms of good governance in Africa, then we wouldn't even be in this situation to start with. So for me, I think Nigeria should go back to the drawing board and begin to do the right thing. Because you can condemn from now to eternity. It's not going to stop anything.
Let me quickly go back to a little bit. The South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, actually blamed drug dealers, Nigerian drug dealers, for the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. I mean, and they're asking Nigerian government to help deal with such ones, such drug dealers, by not allowing them to come bring drugs into their country. What's your take on this one?
Well, I also know that South Africa has been accusing foreigners of crime without necessarily any substantiated evidence to prove it. You know, it's part of the narrative that foreigners are here, they take over our jobs, they are involved in crime. In fact, there was a Pew research in 2018 where 62% of South Africans claimed that foreigners were responsible for the crimes in that city, in that country. So you can imagine the way they think, not necessarily because there is any evidence to show that they foreigners are, you know, criminals. Or so I want to relate that to even this Nigerian issue, taking it home. What is the evidence to show that Nigerians in South Africa, they are the ones doing drug business? What is the evidence to prove that this is the situation? I'm not saying that every Nigerian in South Africa is clean. So no, that's not what I'm saying. But we cannot just keep on, you know, generalizing and saying that this is what people. Then does it mean that South Africans themselves don't do drug business? So I don't agree with that narrative.
Now let's also look at the impact of these xenophobic sentiments, especially towards investments. Just recently, as part of retaliation moves, we had some Nigerians, so to say, going into ShopRite. South African businesses interested in Nigeria, ShopRite. So some ShopRite shops were looted, so to say. MTN office was an outlet. One of the outlets was burnt in Abuja. There's the closure of the South African embassy, and other South African business interests are also having closing shops. What impact will this have on Nigerians and Nigerians in terms of foreign investment, ma'am?
I don't think that I don't see Nigerians' reaction as the right reaction to the problem. But I also want to believe that Nigerians have been bottled up with lots of anger. So it's like this just gave a little opportunity for them to express the anger, their frustrations. But definitely is a wrong move in a wrong direction, because you are indirectly even still inflicting pains on fellow Nigerians. South Africans are not the ones here. All these businesses that they're attacking employ Nigerians. And when they are not taking it, they are not looking at it from the right perspective. And I think that is very wrong. And it's going to have a more damaging impact on us as a nation. We are talking of business organizations here. And you can imagine the number of people MTN has employed, for instance, and all their businesses, you know. So, and they should also know that business outfits are different. I mean, it's not the fault of MTN. If somebody is killing somebody in South Africa, they couldn't have supported that. So I think it's a very wrong approach to this kind of problem.
Now let's look at the solutions at this point in time. Part of the solutions that Nigerians have put forward is the fact that the Nigerian government at this point in time needs to renegotiate the terms of relationship with South Africa. What do you feel about this, ma'am?
I just told you that you negotiate, or you renegotiate. You can only renegotiate on the position of power. Let's ask ourselves, is Nigeria as that powerful? I know we are big. I know we have money, but where is our money? Nigeria is supposed to have the largest economy in Africa. What is the impact of that? This is a country that is really in debt all over. This is a country that, you know, workers are not being paid. This is a country where the health facilities are in a shambles. This is a country where road infrastructures are nothing to write home about. This is a country that is virtually suffering. Every sector is virtually suffering from one form of decay to another. So, I mean, from which perspective is Nigeria going to come out to say we want to renegotiate our relationship with you, South Africa? Because you are going to South Africa to say you are renegotiating. Your people are going there begging them to give them visa. Even right now, I think South Africa is even the one that is even powerful than Nigeria. So people that are saying that we should renegotiate our relationship, I mean, they are not looking at it from the position of power. For all you care, South Africa does not even want Nigerians. That is what they are fighting for. They don't want us. And I tell you one thing. Do you know that how it's difficult to get a South African visa? It's far more difficult to get it than to even get a UK visa or an American visa. There was a time I wanted to travel to South Africa. And honestly, I was going for a program. If you see the way Nigerians gathered in front of the South African embassy, in fact, it's a large crowd. They shut the gates against them. If you see the way Nigerians were being pushed, were being molested, I left the place. I left that place and I got in touch with the organizers of that program that I was not going to go through this because I want to come to your country. So they now got in touch with the officials who now called us and, you know, did the visa for us. So you can imagine, and what I'm telling you happened as far back as probably 9 years ago. So imagine what is happening in Nigeria of today. So I don't think we really, the power that I think we can actually carry is if we actually do the right thing in Nigeria. If we do the right thing for our citizens, if we do something that will stop them from going there in droves, that is what the federal government should be thinking about. But I mean, on the other hand, maybe at a diplomatic level, they could talk about roundtable discussions, talking about, you know, please, we don't want you to do this, but that is just at the diplomatic level.
Finally, because Nigerians actually want solutions to the spate of xenophobic attacks on the Nigerian communities themselves in South Africa. And one of the biggest questions that they've wondered, and which our viewers will also want to get your perspective, is what does the government need to do now to stop this cycle of violence getting completely out of control?
Definitely, the government needs to, even though we are weak, but then you still have to exercise some muscle. So I think, you know, there are also South African interests in Nigeria, which we all know. Government should operate from that perspective. You tell the South African government, look, we also have businesses here. And if you don't stop this attack on our citizens, these are the measures we will take against your interest in our country. I mean, nobody is an island. So Nigerian government should just, you know, make its opinion or its decision known that, look, you have interest here and we will deal with your interest if you don't stop this attack on our citizens. You know, and I'm sure that South Africans themselves, they know, they will understand, because whatever it is, Nigeria is still a very, very big market in Africa. And I don't think Nigeria is a place that anybody will want to joke with in terms of population, in terms of even the economy, in spite of whatever problems that we could be having as a nation.
Ms. Folutile, thank you very, very much for your insightful analysis. Let me start with this question. What is behind the recent government clampdown, especially against opposition critics? What do you think is behind this?
Well, I think that we have gradually instituted or forced on us a government that is intolerant, a government that have failed to listen to the voice of dissent. The government was re-elected, or so it seems. The government took an oath again to uphold the provisions of the Constitution. Part of the provisions of the Constitution the government swore to an oath to uphold is Section 22, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitutional Assembly, which gives the press, the media, the powers to hold government accountable to the people. So, when people come out to protest, when journalists write against government, the said journalist is performing a constitutional obligation, just like government is expected to obey the provisions of the Constitution. So, if government have jettisoned the provisions of the Constitution, same government should not expect the fourth estate of the realm, civil society, to also jettison their constitutional responsibility. We, lawyers, the press, civil society, will not fail the Nigerian state by relinquishing our constitutional rights to peaceful protests, to peaceful assembly, our constitutional right to agitate for good governance and good performance. The citizens will not renege on that. So that is why no matter how government tries to put pressure on the media, on the society, to arrest people, people will continue to talk about the ills of society, because the only way to address the problem is to look at the merits of the complaints. These things that people are talking about, are they true or false? If they are true, how can we address it? That is how it goes. Because the respect that a government is accorded all over the world is tied around the confidence it reposes on her citizens. In South Africa now, they are killing Nigerians, they are looting because the kind of respect that government reposes on the Nigerian citizens is one that is demeaning. It's one that is nothing to write home about.
Now, right, sir, let me first of all get this your perspective on the recent arrest, Gestapo arrest of the journalist Agba Jalingo, that of Shore and others. There's been a lot of reactions as to the legality of the arrests and the charges being leveled against them. What's your reaction first?
Well, my reaction starting
in terms of the legality of the arrest and the charges that are being leveled against them.
Yeah, talking about the arrest and the charges that are being leveled against them. I mean, for Shore, for example, he talked about protests, he talked about revolution now. And under the expression revolution now, it tied around it the demands of the group. That demand explains what the revolution means. The government took the expression revolution now. They left the demands that underpins the description. And, even when the revolution had not taken place, even when the process had not taken place, he was arrested. Okay? In a manner that is more of an abduction. Okay? And then government went on the ground to begin to look for evidence to charge him. Okay, unfortunately, they got an order to hold him for 5 days. And these are issues that because we're gradually destroying Nigeria. Now, for Agba Jalingo, he wrote a story, okay, and then the governor of the state, Ben Ayade, feel that the story is against him, it's an attack against him and all that. Then the next thing is to get on the police. And then the police came to arrest him. Okay, take him on a 10-hour journey. Now, having arrested him, the police, they are now confused as to what charge. Because that's what you get when you arrest someone who... Because, assuming but not conceding that the story is false, the law is that a governor is expected to bring a civil action. Because it's a civil infraction. And then in that civil action, you can get the matter addressed at that level. But here, the government have decided to reverse a civil infraction into a criminal offense. And that is why it took them almost 8 days before they were able to come up with a charge. And now the charge they came up with is nothing near the civil infraction, because they said he's been charged for terrorism, for treasonable felony, and then they also link up the Shawara issue together and all that. You find out that in a state where the governor is able to manipulate and use the police force at his whims and caprices, you have a society that's degenerating into chaos. Because the charge is laughable. I'm yet to see, I'm watching to see the judge that will sit over that case and the evidence that will be tendered. Because when you're talking about treasonable felony, trying to topple a government or trying to take over a government, overthrow a government, have nothing to do with writing a story. Which story came with evidence, came with empirical facts and documents, evidencing how, the said money was diverted. So, this would have been a case of a civil infraction of defamation, and then the governor will have to pursue it in that light. But using the police force is totally wrong and unacceptable.
Let's get your perspective, your legal perspective on it. What does the law, or what provisions or safeguards does the law provide in order to curb abuse of these constitutional infractions or objectives?
Yeah, the law have made provisions. In section 46, for example, of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it talks about, because the whole of chapter 4 of the Constitution talk about the fundamental rights of Nigerians, which are enforceable, as against the, chapter 2, which are not really enforceable. Now, in that section 4, after it listed all the rights of Nigeria, section 46 is where it was concluded, and it said that whenever these rights are violated, or is being violated, or likely to be violated, even preemption, you will bring an action for fundamental right enforcement before the High Court of the state or the Federal High Court. That is what the individual, the aggrieved party, is expected to do. Those are the safeguard for the aggrieved party who is abused, whose constitutional rights have been infringed upon. Okay? And that is exactly in both cases. That is what the counsel, the lawyers in both cases, in case of Shore and have done to bring an action against the said infraction. So when this fundamental right action is brought before the court, then the court will determine it vis-a-vis the rights of the individual with the evidence before the court.
Now let's get your perspective on the reactions of Nigerians towards this clampdown on opposition, dissents, and on the journalists themselves. Would you say that Nigerians are fast losing faith in this government?
Well, there are some Nigerians who completely have lost faith in the government, because people lose faith when the government is unable to perform at its optimum capacity, where unemployment rate has reached a crescendo, where Kidnapping is the order of the day. Insurgency has taken over part of the country, banditry, and the host of it. You understand? People lose faith. It's weighing them. But you also have certain persons who, because when you look at the comments on the social media, you see brutal comments, and that's part of the problem we have, is that Nigerians have failed, some Nigerians have failed to lend their voices to what is truthful and logical because of partisan obscurantism. There are Nigerians who do not know how to be citizens. During campaign and electioneering and all that, you have a right to lean towards a particular political party that you believe in their ideology or manifesto. You have a right to do so. But after voting, you must return to be a citizen. You must clear your head off. Here we don't know how to return. After voting, we believe that whatever that government is doing, or what the government have done, is the right thing, because that's the government we're supporting. So it makes it pretty difficult for the Nigerians to have one voice. I'm sure if that protest has gone on for the second day, the third day, there would have been a counter-protest. Some persons mobilized by government who will willingly collect money to come and counter. If that has gone on, they would have had something like that. Unlike in 2012, where the voice was one on the subsidy crisis, the mobilization was organic. It was overwhelming. You understand? But it tells you that there's no growth in the part of followership in terms of looking at issues constructively. Because part of those who condemn the protest, who condemn the people who came out for the protest, these are the same persons who are unemployed. These are the same persons who are, maybe because a lot of Nigerians, because if you are 40 and below, every person in Nigeria who is 40 and below is born into deprivation. Because we've not seen what good governance is. We don't even know what it is for the past 40 years in Nigeria. Okay? So maybe during the First Republic, the Second Republic, those who lived there, they told us how they graduated from university, they got jobs immediately, they were given cars and all that. But for this present generation, I don't know whether it's because of that level of deprivation that is making people to act the way they want. There are people also argue that you cannot have everybody on the side of the protesters, that you cannot have everybody on the side of opposition. I see reason with that too. But I'm saying that irrespective of the side you belong in, have this government, is the Nigerian government doing well? Has it done well to you as a person? And if it hasn't done well, is it wrong to demand for what is right? Those are the questions that we have not answered. And until we answer these questions, it will be difficult for us to even move forward as a people.
Finally, have the present government's action, Buhari's government's action, that of Buhari, has against critical opposition to the government, has it put them on the path of dictatorship?
What do you call dictatorship? Dictatorship is when you don't listen to the voice of reason. You have a unidirectional perspective about governance. You don't think feedback is necessary. You don't think that you need to do what you call an evaluation process to find out whether your policies are impactful. You understand? So when you have such kind of operation, you have a dictatorship in your hands, okay? Because democracy is supposed to run on the ideals of the rule of law. And the rule of law simply means there are systems and methods, okay? You don't arrest people for an offense that is unknown to law. You don't arrest people because they do not like your style of governance. You rather engage them, okay? Engage them. Because if you do that, you arrest people, You don't follow the rule of law. You don't even obey court orders. And then you turn around. You travel for G7, travel for this and that, looking for investors. You will keep traveling and looking for investors all over. You will never find one because, in energy resources law, there's what they call bankability. Bankability is that assurance that an investor wants to know whether in investing, in financing oil mining operations or prospections, whether the investment is secured and whether profit and investment will be recouped. You understand? So a country that have staggered policy, redundant political system or imbalanced political transitional method, and then that do not have policy consistency and wrong policy direction, you don't expect investors in that climate because you don't have the requisite bankability to attract investors. And once you cannot attract investors, it hits on the economy. Okay? And if you are not also a producing state and you are unable to bring in investors, you begin to fight with multiple problems because the economy will be in shambles. Okay? Unemployment will rise. Existing companies will pull out their funds, repatriate their profit, repatriate their capital to other places to develop, business. Okay? So that is how investment works. There's no investor who wants to come and empathize with the citizens for the failings of their government. No investor does that. Investors will go to a place where the government have been able to put its acts together, and then business is thriving, and there is bankability and there's order. So you have investors there. So what we need is to begin to engage democratic process. Okay, tighten the narrative, and then look at the normatives, and then widen our moral margin to get the citizen engaged in politics, get them engaged in the economy, get the opposition engaged. If you think your narrative is superior, explain to them why it's superior to theirs. If you think theirs is better, key into that. Get those critics, engage them as consultants to take care of those issues they are complaining about. Okay, in so doing, it's not weakness. In so doing, you will have been able to attract investors, and then you will grow an economy that will be viable. There's no rocket science in this.
Mr. Ufeli, thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate it.